Um, Obviously, we're participating virtually. There probably are some members of the public who are attending as well via phone or through their computers. And if they would keep them mute until such time as they wish to speak. Just a reminder, when we're speaking to board members, that just identify yourself so that those who are on the phone can understand who may be doing the presentation. With that, let's have a roll call.
Okay.
I don't think I'm missing anything, am I, Ashley?
No, Mr. Chair.
Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales, State Treasurer Laura M. Montoya.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, Member Michael Sanchez.
I'm here.
Member Paul Cassidy.
Good morning, I am present.
Good morning, Member Wendy Trevisani.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning, Member Joseph Lujan.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Judith. With that, do we have an approval of today's agenda? Do we have a motion for approval of today's agenda?
Treasurer Montoya, so move.
We have a motion
I'll
to
second.
approve today's agenda by Member Montoya, a second by Member Trevisani. Would you please call the roll?
Yes. State Treasurer Laura Montoya,
Yes.
Member Michael Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Paul Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Wendy Trevisani,
Yes.
Member Joseph Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Let's go to item number 3. Do we have a motion to approval of the minutes of January 16th, 2025 regular meeting?
Treasurer Montoya, motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Treasurer Montoya. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Member Lujan. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Trevisani,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, Ashley, I believe we're going to head to consent items 4 through 8, and you'll be making the presentation.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
If you're ready, go ahead.
Thank you. So board members can find the consent agenda starting on page 17 of their board books. The first item, number 4, and item number 5 have been submitted by the Higher Education Department on behalf of some of the higher education institutions. Item number 4 from the University of New Mexico is a request for approval of the acquisition of real property known as Newport Building 1, 2, and 3, located at 2600, 2650 Yale Southeast and 2350 Alamo Southeast in Albuquerque for a total consideration of $4.9 million. Should the board approve, approval would be contingent upon directors and council's receipt of a fully executed general warranty deed. Item number 5 has been submitted by the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center and Hospital, requesting approval of capital expenditures for its radiology center remodel for a total of $7 million. Item number 6 on consent has been submitted by Bernalillo County. This is a request for approval of the sale of real property located at 1500 and 1510 Manal Boulevard Northwest in Albuquerque to the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center for a consideration of $2,425,000. If approved, approval would be contingent upon the directors and council's receipt and review of a favorable review by the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department's Property Tax Division of the appraisal. That is in progress, and we should be receiving that soon. Item number 7 has been submitted by the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. This is a request for approval of the third amendment to the concession contract with Outsource Ventures LLC at Ute Lake State Park. Item number 8 has been submitted by the New Mexico Educational Retirement Board, or ERB. ERB is requesting approval of an amendment to the contract with Enterprise Builders Corporation for the construction of the ERB headquarters located at 5211 Las Soleras Drive in Santa Fe. This would bring the total contract amount to $12,531,732.45. If approved, approval would be contingent upon the directors and council's receipt and review of a fully executed change order number 1. And with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes our short consent agenda this month.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Are there any
Very-
questions by committee members? Do we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda items 4 through 8?
I would move approval. Paul Cassidy.
We have a motion to approve consent agenda items 4 through 8. Do we
Mr. Chairman,
have a
I'll
second?
second it based on the contingency list of items 4, 6, and 8.
Of course. And second by Treasurer Montoya. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Trevisani,
Yes.
Member Luhan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Judith. Let's go to item number 9. And that is University of New Mexico request approval of capital expenditures for construction of the UNM Police Department headquarters. And I believe President Stokes may be on the line, or a representative from UNM.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to go ahead and get started, or Director Brown, did you want to say something first?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Director Brown from the New Mexico Higher Education Department. Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present this project this morning. I want to thank Director Leach and her team for working with the department and the higher education institutions to clarify all your questions for the board members on our submissions. Also want to thank the board for the approval of the items that we had on consent agenda this morning. I appreciate that. For agenda item number 9, the University of New Mexico requests approval of capital expenditures for the construction of the UNM Police Headquarters building. The facility will be located at the southwest corner of the University Boulevard and Mesa Vista Road. It will be a 2-story building and it should be about 16,142 square feet. This request is going to provide public and secure areas divided by a ballistic rated partition. It's going to be a lobby with restrooms, a community meeting room, administrative support areas, a 24/7 police dispatch center, a fitness center, and a lost and found area. The secure areas will have an intake area, holding cells, evidence processing, storage, and interview rooms with audiovisual capabilities. There's also going to be office space for the officers and command staff, along with some conference rooms. There will also be secure parking for the police vehicles, as well as the officers' personal vehicles, and reserved parking for administrative staff. They do have an existing emergency power generator that they will relocate to the new facility from their current location. This project is being funded by $9 million in 2023 UNM institutional bonds, $3.36 million in ING core funding, $1 million in minor capital improvement funds, and $3 million in interest pool for the flex repo funds for a total cost of $16,360,000. I will now turn that presentation over to Executive Vice President Costantinides and the UNM team for their comments as well.
Thank you so much, Director Brown, and Mr. Chair and members of the State Board of Finance. It's a pleasure to see you this morning. My name is Teresa Costantinides, and I am the Executive Vice President for Finance and Administration at the University of New Mexico. President Stokes gives her regrets for not being here. We want to thank you first for your consideration of the UNM projects that were on the consent agenda. We are so grateful for the board's continued support and guidance from your staff and the whole team at the Higher Education Department. We truly appreciate your support of our ongoing efforts to improve our campus community, our student learning environments, our clinical services, and all the necessary infrastructure renewal. Today, we are also seeking approval of capital expenditures for the construction of the UNM Police Department headquarters at $16,360,000. This funding will help us build this new 16,000 square foot headquarters for our UNM Police Department that will be located on the southeast corner of University Boulevard and Mesa Vista Road between the North Campus and the main campus. This new facility will provide enhanced safety and operational efficiency for our police department and will allow us to foster a safer environment for our campus community. Currently, the police department occupies the Hakona Hall dormitory, where the location does not meet the requirements of a modern campus police service. It really hampers the UNMPD's ability to deliver essential safety, security, policing, and outreach services. The space that's currently occupied will be converted back to dormitory rooms once the new headquarters building is complete. And the new location will definitely improve our response time due to its direct access to University Boulevard itself and the proximity to Lomas, Las Lomas, Redondo, and Central Avenue. They'll have improved access really to the entire campus. At this time, I plan to turn things over to Tavia Murray Allred, who is, oh good, you have joined us, our Executive Director of Institutional Support Services, to provide any additional information on the project and the impacts it will have on UNM, the community, and the state. Thank you so much. Tavia.
Good morning. Just briefly, the new police headquarters is a specialized facility designed to bolster community-oriented policing and foster stronger relationships with the student body and the broader UNM community, as well as meet the requirements for a modern campus police service, including a community meeting room, a 24/7 dispatch center with extensive audiovisual systems and redundant communications, multiple security features, including separation between public and secure areas with ballistic rated partitions, hardened structural construction, emergency power generators, and secure fencing and gates. As the existing space occupied by the UNMPD will be returned to much needed student housing, there is no direct offset of square footage with this new facility. We are conscious that this represents a new square footage for the university and have recently removed an older building near the heart of the central campus of nearly 23,000 square feet. Once returned to residence life and student housing, the 12,000 square feet in Hakona Hall will no longer be ING eligible and be maintained and supported by student housing fees, allowing for a near neutral impact on the campus operations and maintenance budgets. The improved space quality and organization in the new headquarters will enhance the operational efficiency and safety for the officers and civilian staff of the department. The location on University Boulevard is supported by the recently approved integrated campus plan, and it will elevate visibility for the department and enhance safety and security for the campus and surrounding community. That will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Teresa, you have anything further? Okay.
No, sir. Thank you.
Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, Paul Cassidy. This sure seems very straightforward. Just one question with regard to ING and BR&R funding. Does this facility qualify?
It will, yes.
I assume it did, so it's the Hakona Hall space will be removed from that, so this is just part of that.
Right.
It makes sense, right? It's essential service for the campus. No questions. I noticed that there were holding cells, and I assume that holding cells are used on a campus, unfortunately, and probably all the safety things like gun storage and evidence lockers and all of that stuff, right?
Correct. Yes, and we do have our Chief of Police, Joe Silva. If Joe, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you've said it all. The police department is a full functioning police department that includes evidence, it includes interview rooms, holding cells, and the dispatch center, along with offices for our staff.
If I could add one more thing, Mr. Chair, Member Cassidy.
Teresa, hold on just a minute. Member Cassidy, you were saying something?
I was just going to follow up with regard to how long prisoners are actually held there, or arrested individuals. Is it a short term, long term? Assume it's short, very short term.
Very short term. It's Chairman, it's very short term. It's just processing the paperwork, and then we transport them to the either the prison transport center or MDC.
Thank you.
Teresa, you were going to say something?
I was just going to mention that one of the interesting things about a police department is because we have the holding cells, the weapons storage, as well as places to store things that are taken from people who are arrested, the building construction is much more robust around those spaces than they would be for the community room, for the entrance areas, those types of things. So it's a very interesting building in terms of the different types of construction that you need for a police department.
Did you say that the present police station is at one of the dorms? And is that the same place that it's been since the 60s?
That's correct. Actually, Tavia, do you know how long it's been in Hocona Hall?
I don't recall, but it has been there for many years. Yes.
Not that I've ever been there, but I can remember it back in the 60s, late 60s. That's where the police station was. I remember correctly. Any other? And believe me, no, I was never there. I promise you, I was never there. But I will say I'm not surprised that President Stokes isn't here today, because she's probably out celebrating because the Lobos beat Utah State, and I have to say Wyoming as well, for Paul's sake. And congratulations to UNM for such a wonderful week. It really was good for the state, good for everybody in New Mexico, actually. But with that, are there any other questions or comments by committee members? And Treasurer Montoya, I see you kind of smiling because you don't believe that I was never there at Hocona Hall at the police station.
I was thinking everyone's a Lobo.
Okay.
From the game. Mr.
Everyone's a
Chair,
Lobo, yes.
I have one question, and we are very proud of our Lobos, so great job to all of you. Just out of curiosity, because the chief is here, with everything that's going on at the national level, I know there's been universities called about immigrants and students and harassment of them. What's going on with the university? How are we protecting our students, their privacy, especially the programs that deal with migrant farm workers, parents who have children? I think both of you and NMSU have a program like that, where there was a prank call telling them that 150 students from UNM got deported. So I just want to know, what is the mindset of UNM? Are you guys partnering together? If you can give us any kind of perspective, greatly appreciate it.
I think, the university has, under the leadership of President Stokes, has set up an ad hoc committee that covers a cross-section of all the concerns across the campus. But as it's specific to the police department, we're working with different leaders throughout the campus to ensure that, our number one priority is the protection of our students, faculty, and staff on campus. And we have protocols already set in place in the event that we have to deal with federal authorities. But that's very unlikely that they would come onto campus. But in the event that they do, we have protocols, and we also will be working with the Office of Legal Counsel in ensuring that we're protecting our students, faculty, and staff throughout the processes.
Mr. Chair and Member Montoya, can I also add that the police have been working very closely on the clinical side, because we also have very similar concerns about whether or not federal authorities might come into our clinical areas. And so both the campus educational part and the clinical part have been working together on that. We do think it is very unlikely. We have been subject to those rumors, false reports, but this is something we've been working actively on.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. With that, are there any other questions or comments by committee members?
I have one real quick.
Go ahead, Member Lujan.
At the 4,000, it looks like it's about 4,000 more square feet. But with the meeting rooms and that kind of stuff, what kind of future growth does that give us? And about how long will do you anticipate the new facility to be adequate?
Chairman Sanchez, Member Lujan, we intend for this to be able to satisfy the police program for many years. And this will allow for the full capacity of their program, whereas in the Hokona space, they aren't able to, we can't accommodate the full need for the police program and services. So we expect that this will be house their full program for many, many years.
Okay.
Member Lujan, you still have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you. That answered it. I was just curious as to how long, it didn't seem like a lot of square footage at 4,000 for considering the meeting rooms and everything, that how long this might be adequate, but sounds like they thought about that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Ashley, anything from staff?
Mr. Chair, staff doesn't have anything else on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, do we have a motion to adopt item number 9 on today's agenda?
Paul Cassidy, I would
Member
move approval,
Trevisani.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, we're
I'll
going to go
second.
with Member Trevisani, motion to adopt item number 9 with a second by Member Cassidy. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Trevisani,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
With that, let's go to item number 10. Albuquerque Housing Authority requests a private activity bond volume cap allocation for the Casitas del Camino Apartments project in Albuquerque. And I believe Mr.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm going to apologize in advance. It might be a little bit noisy. I failed the first test here. I didn't look at the address on the agenda, so I'm sitting in the lobby of the governor's area. So, so our request today is for 16.5 million in private activity volume cap for our project, Casitas del Camino. This project consists of the rehabilitation of 42 existing public housing units located at 112 through 232 6th Street Northwest. This is in the West Mesa neighborhood of Albuquerque. So in addition to rehabilitating the existing 42 units that were built in 1970, we will be constructing an additional 46 units on a vacant parcel of land that we purchased a few years ago that abuts the existing property site. 100% of the units will be low income. 67 of them will have rental subsidy, and 21 of them will just be rent restricted through the low income housing tax credit program. With the new construction, we will also be adding a new community building with a leasing office, laundry center, and a community room for community gathering and for services. We are setting aside 25% of the units on a preferential basis for households with families with children. Right now, the existing units are about 50% vacant. So we will be conducting the rehabilitation portion in phases. So we'll turn over the vacant units to a contractor, have them remodeled, and then we will move the existing households into the newly remodeled units. That way, none of the tenants will have to be relocated off-site. If there are any situations, for example, if we had a household with a disability that for whatever reason could not be accommodated by one of the newly rehabbed units and they needed to be moved back into their existing unit, we would temporarily house them off-site at an appropriate facility at our cost. We have all of the financing in place. We have 16.5 million in construction financing committed from BMO. We have 6.8 million in permanent financing committed from Citigroup, and we have 13 million committed from the Richmond Group and low-income housing tax credit equity. When the project is completed, it will meet Enterprise Green Communities green building criteria, And we will have an energy efficiency rating of 55 or better on the new units and 65 or better on the rehabilitated units. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr.
Just
Chair.
one. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
No, after you, Joe.
Member Lujan?
I was curious as to you said there was about 50% of them vacant currently. Is that because you anticipated the renovation coming or is it?
It is. It's a combination. So we had anticipated the rehab coming for quite a while. It's taken us a little bit longer to get to the point we're at now. But we also did have some sewer line leaks there. And so we moved an additional, I think it was maybe 6 or 8 tenants out at that time. And we put them on to other public housing units. We have since repaired that, but we will we won't move those households back until the units are complete. And any residents like that in that situation where they were moved off site, they do have the right of first return.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lujan. Member Lujan. Member Cassidy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much for the presentation. I thought it might be helpful to hear from the Housing Authority about how many units that you currently have. And I know you've all been doing this for a long time to address the very low and moderate income housing needs for the community and kind of how this fits into the long-term strategy for Albuquerque Housing Authority.
Yeah, so we have a little over 1,000 units. I think it's 1,050 units right now of low-income housing. And that is a mix of tax credit properties, usually with rental subsidy attached to them. And then we still have about 650 units that are public housing. And one of the issues with public housing is we're not able to do any refinance or put any type of liens on public housing properties. So that really constrains our ability to address major capital needs with the properties. So what we have been doing over the last 5-6 years is we've been converting them out of the public housing program and converting them to tax credit projects with Section 8 contracts for the rental subsidies. That is probably going to be a pattern we follow for quite a few of our units, just because that's the only tools that we have to address the housing need. And there is significant housing need. In addition to the public housing units, which we have over 3,000 households on the wait list for units in our public housing program. We also administer about 4,000 housing choice vouchers. And on that program, we gave up on a wait list because it was getting to be over 10,000 people on the wait list. So we just do lotteries every year. So it's all just a demonstration of significant housing needs in Albuquerque.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate hearing the big picture on this, and no questions with regard to the project.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Member Treasurer Montoya.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. To your last point on how you handle it on a yearly basis, can you give us a little bit more perspective on your lottery terminology?
I'm gonna turn that over to our Executive Director, Linda Bridge, to address that.
Hi, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For our Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher Program, we take applications once a year and then randomly pull from those applications to create a wait list. And as Dan was mentioning, so that's what we mean by lottery. It's just how we create the wait list for those vouchers. Currently, again, demonstrating demand, we received in a month's time span 6,000 applications. We will probably only have the funding availability to maybe issue 100 vouchers this year. So we're at a fraction of the percentage of the population that needs served, the ability to serve them through the existing federal funding. So a project like this, it's one demonstration of how we're not only trying to preserve the much needed public housing that has that project-based assistance, but we're also looking for opportunities in that same time, how do we expand it? So this is a second example that we've done, that we've been able to almost double the number of units at a site by rehabbing and doing new construction.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have even more concern. So once a year, people end up needing housing throughout the year. So how do they know when to go and put their name down? And when you say that it's randomly pulled, how is it randomly pulled? Where's the process in that? And let me tell you where I'm coming from. I was on Section 8 when I was going to college, and there was a lot of people that were letting their close friends or their friends that were in college with us get the Section 8 housing before the rest of us could get a fair shot. So when you say random, to me, I feel like there needs to be a process that is more publicized, or that shows that random selection was fair. So how exactly is it done nowadays?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, Member Montoya, Treasurer Montoya. The process is completely, so number one, everything we do is fully transparent. So when we open for applications once a year, that we provide notice in the newspapers, notice on our website. We collect names throughout the year, collect information from people who want to be notified when we open the wait list. So we do robocalls, we do postings, we do legal notices. We use multiple ways to make that available, social media, to make it known to the public that time span in which we're taking applications. And additionally, that's part of our administrative plan that gets approved by HUD. Once a year, we go through a redraft of that plan and post it for public comment. We're starting that public comment period here starting Friday. It's a 45-day public comment period. So we publish that plan, we take public comment, and then that plan is also available on our website. The process in which the waitlist is created is completely done by a third-party vendor, our software vendor. So staff has no way to influence that waitlist. I hear and understand your concern, and that was one of our primary, when we moved to this method of creating the waitlist about 10 years ago, we wanted to make sure that was completely free from any potential fraud. And so that is performed by our software vendor. They do the lottery and create the wait list. And so there's no way for staff to influence that creation of that wait list.
That's wonderful, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And then last question is to Mr. Martinez from Housing New Mexico. Did you have any comments? Mr. Cassidy had mentioned overall, what does this look like? And I think he was really referring to Housing New Mexico as far as what we've been doing on the housing side. What does that look like overall for us? So if you could just give the board a little bit of perspective, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. Jacobo Martinez from Housing New Mexico, Assistant Director for Housing Development. We have reviewed this application and we have underwritten it, and it does meet the criteria and the standards that we require for our underwriting guidelines. It does show a positive cash flow, and it will be a feasible project. I think the question as far as how it fits throughout the entire program, we need affordable housing as much as possible throughout the state of New Mexico. This does add more units to affordable housing, and we appreciate that. And we've always had good working relationships with Albuquerque Authority. And the addition of the units is something that we are excited about, and we're hoping we see more in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Just a couple of quick questions. Did you say there were 6,000 applicants and only 100 picked out of the 6,000?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the last round of taking applications, yes, there was approximately 6,000 applications. We have not yet begun to be able to draw any names from that wait list because currently we're at 113% budget utilization. So we don't have any vouchers available right now to distribute, and we do that just as vouchers get returned. And so we're waiting through attrition to bring our budget utilization number down, and then would start drawing from that wait list. My estimate, my best guesstimate is that over the next year, we'll maybe be able to serve 100 people off of that 6,000 person wait list.
When the project is completed, will that number go up?
Mr. Chair, this project we will create a wait list specifically for this project. So the first people that this project will serve are the tenants, as Dan mentioned, that are currently living there and or were relocated off-site. They will be the first ones to be able to fill the units. And then we'll create a new wait list specific for this project that we will then pull additional names for. And we'll create that wait list near towards when construction is wrapping up.
When you say you're the company looks at it and decides how and who to pick, is part of it based on need, I would imagine?
Mr. Chair, to qualify for these units, well, really for any of our programs, individuals have to be below a certain income level.
Right.
And then it goes then after that, it's based on any preferences for a given project. So in this case, the preferences are for households with children. Okay. So the first test is an income test, and then by any preferences.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're sorry.
That's what I was getting at. I wanted to know about family with children and preferences with families with children.
Yes, and just Mr. Chairman, just to make a distinction, we're talking about sort of two different programs here. There's the Section 8 program, that's the housing choice voucher that had the 6,000 applicants. Mm-hmm. And that is a separate program from the public housing or the low-income housing tax credit program in the project. So this project, we, in addition to having the 25% of the units set aside on a preferential basis for families with children, we also do have a preference for veterans or active duty military service members as well.
Thank you, and I put them together, so I apologize for that. With that, are there any other questions or comments by committee members?
Just
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
No, please go.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members. I'm just wondering, I mean, this wait list, I know it's such a big unmet need. The supply demand imbalance is insanely tragic. And I'm wondering, all these people on the wait list, is there a lot of collaboration and continued communication and hand-holding? I mean, it's really an issue, and you have thousands of people who probably don't have a lot of access to the internet and educate, you know, so they really need a lot of help. And is it the affordable housing, is there like a collaboration amongst them, or is it up to HUD and organizations like HomeWise to kind of coordinate all these people with these unmet needs? Sorry, there's some background noise.
Yeah, I would imagine that background noise is at the governor's office. They're in the lobby.
Yeah, our apologies for that. Madam Chair, members, it is very challenging. I agree. Try to move this closer. We get probably 1,000 calls at least a month from people looking for services, and with our wait lists, we're not able to serve them. We create a resource guide. We have partnerships with dozens of different partners throughout the city. We do our best to try to connect people with services to help their immediate needs through those partnerships, through referrals to other resources. There are many affordable housing committees and groups that are working together to try to solve this housing issue that we're part of. So there are a number, between us and the city and Housing New Mexico and the county and numerous nonprofit developers. We're all looking at how we tackle this issue. Unfortunately, funding is the biggest limitation. I mean, there's challenges with the availability of labor and some of the challenges, in just the zoning and permitting processes that also create challenges. But really, funding is one of the greatest constraints. We're all relying on low-income housing tax credits, which are limited. Your private activity bond cap, Dan and I both used to work for Housing New Mexico. We remember when bond cap was, there was more than enough bond cap to go around, and that's not the case anymore. So it really is, and now we're facing a future with uncertain federal funding. So, we're fortunate. We have a strong network of partners that we're all trying with our limited resources to address those needs and help those people on the wait list. But it is a challenge.
Member Trevisani, you still have the.
Yeah, I just want to express my gratitude. Thank you for all you do. Really appreciate it. I hope your resources continue to expand.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Trevisani. Member Cassidy, I think you had something.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much. And I would echo Member Trevisani's thoughts about how important this is and appreciate Albuquerque Housing Authority, Linda and Dan's work to get new projects built. And it's probably taken you, 3 or 4 or 5 years to put this together. We're at the end of a process that they probably spent thousands of hours on. And it's just making a dent in our whole need. So I appreciate the overview. And later on in the agenda, Mr. Chair, we have the quarterly report of severance tax bonding capacity that's available for Housing New Mexico and other programs. And hopefully Mr. Martinez will stay on to maybe address some of our questions there. That was my only thought. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Hearing none. With that, do we have a motion to adopt action item number 10 on today's calendar?
Mr. Chair, I'd be happy and very happy to move approval of this project, the private activity volume cap for this project.
We have a motion to adopt item number 10 by Member Cassidy, a second by Treasurer Montoya. Before we go to there, Ashley, I forgot. Is there anything further from the staff?
Mr. Chair, no, thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Cassidy,
Yes.
Member Trevisani,
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Before we end here, just let me ask Mr. Foster and maybe Member Cassidy a question. If we got all the money we needed to meet the needs, I mean, probably billions of dollars, if for some reason all of a sudden we had that money, would they be able to build in a sufficient amount of time to get things done where you would meet the need? I'm just curious because of construction costs. I think some of the zoning and all of the other things that go into trying to get it accomplished. Is it possible if the legislature for some unknown reason would all of a sudden say, I mean, we're just going to direct all the money toward housing and here you've got it. Would it work or would it not work? Member Cassidy first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was hoping Mr. Foster would go first, but all I can say is the governor recognizes this, and she's, I think this year requested a $500 million to be allocated to housing, and she's done that this last year, and much lower amounts were actually approved by the legislature, probably because of your question, Mr. Chair. How can we actually put that to work in an environment where we have these high construction costs, limiting factors such as availability of land and infrastructure. I guess where I would be, subject to the experts sitting in this meeting, is, we need land banking and we need infrastructure finance to help developers get there. If you borrow 100% of what you need for these kinds of projects, you can't meet the needs of the very low and moderate income households because their average median income not being able to pay the rent. So the subsidy is required in this market anyway. But I defer to Mr. Foster and Linda Bridge.
Mr. Foster, Ms. Bridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I think it would be a little bit painful at first. I think it's something that needs to happen to address the issue. More funding needs to go into it. There is a little bit of a constraint still on the construction side, both in terms of cost, but even in terms of labor availability. But I don't think you can solve that issue without bringing the money in also, right? Because that capacity is not going to grow unless there's the demand for that growth. So, and I think that's same thing across the board, whether it's contractors, whether it's building permit inspections, that's across the board. They will lag a little bit behind the funding, but without the funding, they won't grow.
Let me ask you, Mr. Foster, what advantage is it for a developer to do low to moderate income housing as opposed to the regular development like we have here in Las Lunas and Belen? All of a sudden, I mean, houses are going up like weeds, basically. And so is there an advantage to a developer to do minimum to low housing? Is there some incentive that you can give a developer to do medium to low income housing that would give them incentive to do more?
Well, part of it is, a lot of us in this area are mission driven. We're public housing authorities, we're nonprofits. So it's very much a mission driven objective. But at the same time, there is some funding built into these deals. So with the tax credit program, we are allowed to collect a developer fee. That ends up being one of our backup sources of financing. So when the cost overruns come in, or there's just not enough funding out of the gate, you'll see a big portion of that developer fee is deferred. And hopefully the project cash flows and we get paid out that way. So I think that is a big portion of what draws the developers into this market is developer fees, but firstly, mission.
Member Cassidy, do you have a thought for me on that? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
And you've been
Mr.
doing this a
Chair.
long
Yeah,
time, and I'm curious.
no, that's a really good question. How can you accelerate it? Is your question? If we had the dollars like we have today, I'm looking at Mr. Lujan. This is kind of his business as well. He may have some thoughts on how you accelerate construction, how you land bank, how you set aside all of the resources that you need to get it done. So we have a lot of state land, for instance. I mean, is state or federal lands available? I know in terms of military housing, the state land office has raised their hand and said, there's land. We will help you get land if you need it for military housing, which is a whole different situation than low and moderate income housing because it's more attainable housing. They make a little more than low and moderate income rules and restrictions allow. I think it's possible, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. And I'll go to Member Lujan in just a minute, but that brings up the point here in Las Lunas. All of a sudden, there's some property that's west of the interstate, just right across from Las Lunas. where the kind of new development is going. It used to be called grasslands. And I'm not even sure how much acreage it is. And it's state-owned property, but now the village of Los Lunas wants possession of it. And down deep in my heart, I know exactly what they're going to try to do with it. And it isn't going to be about low-income housing or medium-income housing. I know that for a fact, the way the developers have been coming into Los Lunas area. But that's a good example. I'm glad you brought that up for me, and it's important. Member Lujan, do you have any thoughts on it? And I'm sorry to prolong this longer than it probably should, but it's all of a sudden it's just bugging me a little bit, I guess is the right word. Just bugging the heck out of me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with most everything that was said. I know the zoning and permitting creates a lot of challenges. We've done a few different projects, and that always, there's a big shortage of inspectors and everything else, so that slows everything down a lot. I think tax credits to the developers that can help incentivize them to do it. Nobody's going to do it unless they can figure out a way to make it make sense financially. And so I think a little bit of everything that everybody's talked about can help free some of this stuff up. Finding land and those kind of things, I think will incentivize more people to do it. I know Santa Fe is finally starting to get some, but it's from the developers I talked to, it's a pretty tough process to get some of that stuff through. Making a little bit of that easier would help a lot.
Thank you, Member Lujan. Treasurer Montoya, did you have something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of thoughts. I feel your frustration. I'm on the Housing New Mexico board as well, and we see the need, and they're working as hard as they can to distribute the funds to all of the different programs that they have. But to your question and your point, I hate to be a negative Nancy, but if you put all the money in there, you're still not going to be able to supply as fast and as quickly as we need, based on the need, based on the cost of lumber. And also now labor was already an issue, but now with all of the president's new executive orders, labor is going to be becoming a bigger issue. I will say on a positive note, there is there's a bill that both the governor's office and Housing New Mexico have been working on. And Daniel from the governor's office is working on the zoning aspects, and they're looking at there he is. He can talk about it better than I can. But they're doing a collaboration to try to help some of this cluster of problems internally. And so maybe if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman, because I think this is an important topic that you bring up, he can tell you a little bit more of what that bill consists of and how it's planning on helping conquer some of these challenges overall in housing.
Sure. And by the way, Treasurer Montoya, it's called Debbie Downer, Saturday Night Live.
Thank you, Jim.
So go ahead, Dan. Or Daniel.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we're working on Office of Housing and Planning Production Bill. We actually now have two bills running, one on the House side and one on the Senate side. It's Senate Bill 205 and House Bill 448. Just trying to dual track it because things aren't moving as quickly as we'd like on the Senate side. But yeah, the idea is to work more on the systems level with housing. So thinking about how do we fix some of the underlying problems that are driving housing costs and particularly housing development costs? This helps move, get more impact out of our state investments in housing by needing less subsidy and helping more people without subsidy. So a lot of the work is focused on that, focused on creating better regulatory frameworks. So really looking at land use and zoning as one of the big obstacles to new housing that is driving affordability issues. Looking at how we support local governments to do better at fixing their local housing problems. And then, of course, coordinating resources within the state. I think we do a lot more housing in state government than we realize, but a lot of it's happening in sort of anecdotal ways. So how do we organize things to be more strategic towards housing and housing systems? The last one is really tackling housing data. and getting a lot better system for tracking outcomes and understanding if what we're doing is working around housing. Just housing data isn't as transparent as it could be. We want to build a housing dashboard to be able to show down to the community level what's happening with housing and whether or not we're moving in the right direction or not. I think a good example is, we're short tens of thousands of units in New Mexico. Albuquerque alone needs 55,000 in the next 15 years. And our permit numbers are going down the last 2 years. So and I think we've got a lot of uncertainty at the federal level that impacts this stuff, both on the homelessness and the housing affordability side. That's the other big piece of work is we have a director of homeless initiatives. She comes to us from a lot of work in Texas and working on creating a systemic response for homelessness at the state level. So that's all that stuff in the bill. And I'm happy to chat with folks if they want to learn more about what we're working on. But yeah, I think this is an important step for us trying to move in a different direction around housing.
Daniel,
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya.
Daniel, why don't you give Ashley an email address or a phone number, whichever you prefer. So
I think Ashley probably has my email address and phone number, but yeah, please share it across.
Mr. Chairman, just one last question I'd like him to point out is there's a piece in there that mentions the creativeness of housing.
Yeah.
I remember tiny houses. I don't remember all the rest of it. Can you just tell the chairman about that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Madam Treasurer, we're working on, one of our big threads of work is figuring out how to tackle innovative approaches to housing development. We need so much housing that we literally can't stick build all the housing we need to. So we're looking at modular and manufactured and tiny homes and new construction methodologies, all kinds of different ways to meet the need that hopefully can put us at the forefront. And I think one of the big things we're looking at as part of the Western Governors Association chair initiative called Brand West, we're looking at a regional approach with modular housing where we have similar regulatory frameworks and inspection reciprocity across state lines and some funding and economic development supports to really grow that sector.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, it's really exciting. I mean, sometimes it could be a little bit overwhelming with the amount of need that's out there, but Housing New Mexico is trying to get as much out as quickly as possible, and they're now not duplicating efforts. So instead, it's coming together and collaborating to be able to get as much accomplished as possible. So on a positive note, hopefully that helps the overall conversation about housing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. Member Trevisani, did you have something you would like to go into?
I do not. I just, this topic is so at the forefront. I'm Vice Chair Dan Corum, and our biggest issue is probably trying to tackle homelessness. And there are some models out there, Denver, Austin, that have just done a phenomenal job. I mean, they haven't solved the problem, but the inroads they've made have been so spectacular. So I would just love to see all these groups like collaborate and come together and not be duplicative. It just be, it's a big issue, funding aside, but there are so many kind of cooks in the kitchen working on this. So hopefully we can all, Treasurer Montoya, I feel like we should talk offline about this. But yeah, thank you again very much for all you guys are doing.
Yeah. And Wendy, I just wanted to add, Taylor Cook, who just joined our office, she comes actually from Austin, has worked for the city of Austin. She's just wrapping up a PhD dissertation on Houston's model for homelessness. And we've been talking closely with Jerry and Jenny pretty regularly and getting into a sort of coordinating both across local governments, private sector funders, and state agencies who have a lot of housing programs and a lot of potential resources to bring to bear if we can get it all aligned. So yeah, we're really excited about it, and Taylor's a huge addition to our office.
Wonderful. Congratulations. Good move.
Thank you, Member Trevisani. With that, Mr. Foster, Daniel, Linda, committee members, thank you for the discussion. I appreciate you allowing me to go into the time, but thank you all.
Thanks, Chairman, members of the board. Thank you.
You're welcome. You take care. Have a good day.
I don't think we voted yet.
I thought we did.
Did we?
I thought we had gone through the vote.
Yes, there was a roll call vote and it passed.
Thank you, Chairman. Got
Okay, Debbie Diller. All right, I'll remember. Yeah, after that discussion, probably right. We would forget. Let's go to item number 11. That is State Treasurer's Office Quarterly Investment Report for quarter ended December 31st, 2024. Vicki, are
Good
you
morning,
out there?
everyone.
Hi, Vicki.
Yeah,
Good
can you hear
morning.
me?
We can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman, members of the board. I am reporting on the fourth quarter of 2024, ended December 31st. At the end of the quarter, the Treasurer's Office managed over 17 billion in assets, 17.1-ish approximately. We earned approximately 177 million in earnings over the quarter. And we're hanging on to an 88 million unrealized gain for the fiscal year ended 12/24. Of key importance, the LGIP is now over 2.1 billion in assets. That's a huge milestone for us. That's the highest, the largest it's ever been since it's been under management. We're also getting in the severance tax bonding fund, oil and gas receipts, about 170 million a month. So that engine is still pumping. So the state is still flush with cash. We are maintaining our portfolio durations in this economic environment and the monetary policy easing that the Fed has taken on at about 95 to 100% of our benchmarks. We continue to be fully invested or fairly fully invested in corporate securities between 20 and 25% of the portfolios. And the background on the monetary policy situation is that in the quarter, the last quarter of 2024, the Fed reduced the federal funds rate by 50 basis points or 0.5%. And with the December meeting, they indicated that they were only expecting 2 federal funds rate cuts in 2025. At the September meeting, they had indicated 4 cuts equaling 1% in 2025. So we have had kind of a bit of a backlash in terms of where U.S. Treasury yields have moved since then. We're probably about 70 basis points higher in yield since that meeting. And so far this year, we're pretty much with that backup in yields over the last quarter. Right now, the market is kind of trading in a range with not much movement. So we're waiting for the next series of data. It feels like the Fed is on hold in terms of monetary policy. They have already cut rates by 1% from 5.25%, where it is now at 4.25%. And market isn't anticipating any further rate cuts or not pricing them in at the moment until December of 2025. So the monetary policy picture has changed somewhat since we last convened, and we were looking at 3% handles on U.S. Treasury yields, and now we're solidly in the 4% yields on treasuries. So the landscape has changed. We are maintaining that 95 to 100% benchmark, closer to the 95% range, and the performance has continued to be strong versus benchmarks. And I think that's all I have. I can stand for any questions.
Thank you, Vicki. Questions or comments by committee members? Member
Mr.
Cass?
Chair. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vicky. Great report. Great job. Appreciate the comment about yields versus benchmarks. We continue to perform well. The state does. I have a question for the treasurer and Vicky and her staff. Is there a demand for money from rural banking institutions that you've noticed? Is there folks calling you asking for money in terms of having funds that they can use to lend to their local communities and businesses as they try to grow?
Mr. Chairman, there has
actually-
not been.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please, Vicky.
No, you can. You probably have better feel for that.
We've had a few smaller banks ask us if we would be interested in doing something like that. Something that just recently came up is Southwest Capital just got bought out by a credit union in Las Vegas, New Mexico. We've been asked or told that we now have to keep the money in the credit union. We've stated that's not legally permissible. There's another situation where a bank had told some commissioners and elected officials at the county and local level that if they put more people on the bank account, they can get a $250,000 FDIC each. That is inaccurate. The state treasurer's office and the state auditor wrote a letter to make sure that people know that that's actually very high risk, and that is not the case on FDIC insurance. We've had other ones who are considering something called network, where, for example, the credit union wants to put a certain amount of money in there and then take out 250,000 FDIC from a bunch of different banks throughout the United States, which Vicky had done an analysis on, and that violates our Constitution. So we've told them no. So as it relates to a lot of different creative ways that people are trying to do things outside of what 6-10-10 requires on the investment side or what the banking side requires, we've been pretty clear in those conversations. There was a piece of legislation that one of the banking associations reached out to us on. I don't think they've moved forward with that piece of legislation. But as it relates to any banks specifically wanting to meet with us or visit with us on some funding sources, nothing too serious yet. We have offered to have a conversation, but on our end, sometimes they can't even come close to the rate that we need in order for us to make sure that we're getting best return. And so it's a hard situation, and we haven't come into a position where we've thought of doing anything different than the strategy we're doing currently.
Thank you,
I don't know
Treasurer.
if Vicky has something else to add to that, Chairman.
Vicky, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. The only thing that we did notice slightly was few of the larger banks that we have large deposits in, the ones that are domiciled or have presence in New Mexico, have slightly lowered their deposit rate or have approached us with interest rates having dropped on the federal funds rate. We've followed those interest rate reductions down in terms of our deposit rates. And most recently, Bank of Montreal, BMO, lowered our rate by 5 basis points. So, we're seeing a little bit of that happening.
And Mr. Chairman, we did not keep money in BMO. We had to move it, and we kept it at a higher rate with another bank that was willing to keep their rate at the higher end. So it's a lot of navigating. Anna and Vicky have to be on top of where rates are going up or where rates are going down. Also, the amount of liquidity that we need, which is significantly higher than what you would anticipate. So it's a lot of strategy, a lot of creativity, and a lot of teamwork on this end, especially as rates become more volatile. But right now, we're still doing pretty good on it. Anything that we couldn't keep in those banks, we need to do in repo. But I would say this does put us in a little bit of a constraint in the sense that a bigger portion of our liquidity funds are in just a few banks. And so, for example, now New Mexico Bank and Trust just got sold out. They're going to be now UMB. And the risk factors, because they're transitioning, aren't in a position that we could actually work with them. Plus their rate is too low at this point because of the shock, that they're going through in the transfer. So it's a limitation. We're trying to keep a strengthening relationship with each of our banks, but as they decide to make shifts, we too will have to make some shifts that are in the best interest of the state.
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. Member Cassidy, you still have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, for that discussion. Thank you, Treasurer. Thank you, Vicki. I noticed there's about $1.1 billion or so, $1.2 billion in bank deposits, but they're all money center banks. There are really no local regional banks. We don't have the Jim Foley's and Henry Jaramillo's from Belen, right? That used to really rely on this program to help fund businesses and so forth. In Las Vegas, the same kind of thing. They're mostly large money center banks. Just curious, because I was approached by somebody saying, why don't we create a program that we used to have at the State Board of Finance, working with the treasurer at the time, to lower the cost of funds for rural institutions that have a demand for money from clients. But sounds like we're not seeing that kind of demand at all. So thank you for the discussion. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Ashley? Nothing?
Nothing, Mr. Chair.
This is an action item, correct?
Correct, just informational.
Vicki, thank you very much. We always appreciate you. Great job. Thank you, Treasurer Montoya, as well. Appreciate it. With that,
Thank
why
you,
don't we go-
Sharon. Have a great day.
You too. Let's go to informational items, and number 12, General Service Department Capital Building Repair Fund Financial Status Report for month ended January 31st of 2025. Ashley?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I will be presenting on these informational items. Happy to answer questions as we go. If there are any questions I can't answer, since these reports were all submitted by entities and I'm reporting on them, I will be happy to take those questions back to those submitting entities. But item number 12 is the monthly reporting from GSD. This is for the Capital Buildings Repair Fund Financial Status Report for month ended January. This can be found on page 1060 of your board packets if you're following along. For January, GSD expended $31.8 million out of a total $41 million in awards. The revenues into the fund for January totaled $0, with expenditures at just over $146,000. The fund balance for fiscal year 25 to date was $42.2 million, with about $29.4 million uncommitted at this point. GSD's report in your board packets provides a narrative on some of the specific projects underway and completed through Santa Fe in January. And just as a reminder, I always want to point out that the Capital Buildings Repair Fund comprises funds from an allocation from the Land Grant Permanent Fund of 1.1%. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions or gather any questions for GSD.
Any questions or comments concerning informational item number 12? Okay, Ashley, I guess we'll go to number 13.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members, this is also submitted by GSD. This is their monthly legislative capital projects financial status report. So these are the projects for which GSD received capital appropriations and manages. This is for the report for the end of January of this year. It's on page 1064 of the board packets. In January, there was a total of $201 million expended out of a total $490 million in total appropriations. And again, this report provides a listing of all of the appropriations received and managed by General Services divisions, as well as status on those projects. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will stand for any questions or collect any questions for GSD.
Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair, may I ask just one quick question of Ashley?
Absolutely, Member Cassidy.
Yes, the word expended, does that mean cash out the door or just a contract signed?
It should be actual expenditures that
Actual
they have
expenditure.
either incurred. Now, I don't know, Mr. Chair and Member Cassidy, whether they've submitted all the draw requests to the Board of Finance for that amount. It may have been expended by them under contract and they haven't yet been reimbursed, although typically I think GSD is pretty good at submitting draw requests to the Board of Finance on a monthly basis. So.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, Ashley, why don't we go to number 14?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So item number 14 is the monthly State Treasurer's Office investment report. This is for month ended December 31st. This is on page 1072 of your board packets. At the end of December, the State Treasurer's Office managed $17.1 billion in assets. During the month, the office earned approximately $58.8 million from its investment positions. And on an unrealized mark-to-market basis, the portfolios decreased by $17.9 million. I know that Ms. Hingis just provided a quarterly report and touched on some of the more current happenings going on, but the monthly report has been provided to the board through its packets and will be available after the meeting. And happy to answer any questions if I can.
Questions or comments by committee members? Ashley, let's go to item number 15, please.
Yes. Yes, Mr. Chair and members, item number 15 is the reporting of our emergency balances as of today. The board has remaining $2,621,056.57 in its operating reserve fund with its emergency water fund fully expended. You can see the listing of awards for this fiscal year to date on page 1207 of your board packets. It reflects awards to the Village of Columbus of $366,000 in September, an award to Cañada de los Alamos Mutual Domestic for $20,600 in October. Excuse me. Also a grant provided to Casas Adobes Mutual Domestic of $342,343.43 in November. And then, of course, last month when the board approved $650,000 in emergency grant funds to Bernalillo County Metro Court. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Questions or comments by committee members? Member Treasurer Montoya.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director. By chance, has the city of Las Vegas reached out to you about their water issue and not having water for the last 4 or 5 days?
Mr. Chair, Madam Treasurer, I have not received any correspondence from them. Mr. Deputy Director Trujillo, have you heard from the city?
Mr. Chairman, Ashley, no, I haven't.
So,
okay.
Madam Treasurer, no.
Okay, just something that might come up for the Board of Finance to consider is they're having a huge water crisis occurring, well, lack of water, and they're coming with big trucks from Santa Rosa, but the trucks had to come from out of state. And I've heard it's a couple $1 million that it's going to cost. So I did tell them to call you if they needed help, but I think the governor was helping them with something as well.
Thank you, Montoya. With that, let's go, Ashley, if you don't mind, let's go to item number 16, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members, item 16 is the monthly fiscal agent and custodial bank fees report. This can be found on page 1209 of your board packets. In January, the Board of Finance continued to realize large negative net fees for fiscal agent and treasury services driven by the 2.5% earnings credit rate applied by Wells Fargo. Excuse me. Gross fees prior to application of the earnings credit totaled about $102,000, a little over that, which was about the same as last month. And the custodial bank fees, which very little from month to month, totaled $13,810.
Thank you, Ashley. You need to take a little break.
I'm going to try and push on through. As you all can tell, I've got a little bit of a cold, so I don't cough.
Questions or comments by committee members? With that, Ashley, just take a little break. We've gone through this pretty quickly, so we're not in a major rush. So when you feel you're ready to go to item number 17, please feel free. But don't rush on our account.
Mr. Chairman, while we wait, I forgot to tell you all, Steve Marsico retired from the treasurer's office. And so right now, Dominic Chavez is the interim cash manager assisting us. He's been with the office for quite some time. He has his master's degree, and he's been the general manager in the cash management side and has taken on this role in years past. So he was a great team player to step up and do this role for us until we find a cash manager to assist us. So if any of you know anyone, by all means, send them our way.
Thank you for letting us know, Treasurer Montoya. Appreciate it. Plus, I think you gave Ashley enough time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully I can make it through. It's a little touch and go, but so item number 18, or I'm sorry, item number 17 is the DFA joint powers agreements for the month ended January 2025. This is on page 1212 of your board packets. During the month of January, DFA approved 3 joint powers agreements, and those agreements are listed on that page in your packets.
Any questions or comments? Ashley, would it be okay if Mr. Trujillo finished up on 18 and 19, if he can do that?
Mr. Chair, on item number 19 is a report that I'll provide, and I think I can be pretty quick about that. Item number 18, I'm happy to give a brief update. I don't know, Marcos also has a little bit of a cough today, so the whole entire Board of Finance has been taken out.
Okay. Go ahead.
But I'm happy to do it briefly. I think I'll be okay.
Okay, just don't want you to get any worse.
Thank you. It's just a par for the course with this. So item number 18, Mr. Chair and members, is the Housing New Mexico Housing Trust Fund second quarter fiscal year 25 earmark report. This has been provided to the board on page 1214 of your board packets. MFA or Housing New Mexico is reporting on fiscal year 24 and 25. I'm going to focus on fiscal year 25, as fiscal year 24 is been completely awarded, completely procured, almost entirely awarded, and about 55% expended. For fiscal year 25, they have procured 100% of the $34.62 million that was provided to them in the severance tax note earmark. They've awarded 97% of that, or about $33,620,000. And they've expended about $8.1 million, or 23%. And the activity in that report, excuse me, has occurred for fiscal year 25 solely in down payment assistance and gap financing for single family rental development.
Thank you, Ashley. Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chair.
Member Cassidy.
Thank you very much for the report, Ashley. I had kind of earlier in the meeting asked for Jacobo Martinez to stay on to possibly let us know, my request, if there's a dashboard of some sort of reporting that can be done so we can see really what's being done. You know, having the money in big chunks laid out is great. Glad it's moving out, being awarded and all of that stuff. But what does it mean in terms of accomplishing the goals that have been set out for use of this money, like number of units, number of people served, other things that I know MFA's historically Housing New Mexico's done. They keep track of all kinds of things, but maybe build this out a little bit now that we're a year and a half, 2 years into this, would be my only suggestion, and not a request, just a suggestion.
Mr. Martinez, would you like to reply? And by the way, Mr. Martinez is very familiar with Valencia County as well, just so you all know. He was here for a while. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member Cassidy. Yes, absolutely. We will. I'll talk with the people who do the reporting for the Mexico Housing Trust Fund, and we can provide that information. I think that's a great amount of that will really help just visually seeing it. I appreciate that. And I think just anecdotally, I can say that we really do appreciate this money from the housing development perspective. It's provided a lot of gap financing for these projects, especially these 4% projects that come in front of this board. Because these 4% projects do need a lot of subsidy, and that includes the New Mexico Housing Trust Fund. I think most of them have asked for the maximum amount of our New Mexico Housing Trust Fund to make these projects feasible. And we really appreciate your work on the board and the board's work to make that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Anything further, Member Cassidy?
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. I think it'd be nice for us to be able to see what's being accomplished and to kind of let people that we're in contact with know that that money is really being well utilized to create the housing that we need, that we talked about. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for that discussion earlier. That was really good.
Thank you, Member Cassidy. Member Lujan, you have any comments?
No, I was just unmuting and for the end.
All right. Any other questions or comments by committee members? Ashley, I guess we'll go to number 19.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Item number 19 is a very informal update. We're in the middle of legislative session, as everyone knows. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of key bills that Board of Finance staff are keeping track of. It's just for the board's awareness. So the first bill I want to talk about is Senate Bill 274, which is actually a bill that the Board of Finance staff are putting forward for consideration by the legislature. It has Senator Worth and Representative Tara Lujan as the sponsors. It has not been scheduled. It's awaiting to be scheduled in Senate Rules Committee. But this bill would amend 13-6-1 through 3 NMSA 1978, which are the statutes that govern real and tangible personal property dispositions. And as the board is aware, we get a lot of real property dispositions under 13-6-2.1 specifically. And what we're proposing with this bill is really and I know we've talked about it a lot in the past with the board members, but really just to increase the thresholds for which local entities, community colleges, special districts, school districts, counties have to come to the board for approval of property dispositions. So leases, sales, trades, donations. So we're proposing the following increases in thresholds, and then I'll talk a little bit about how this impacts not just the Board of Finance. So right now, any lease or sale above $25,000 needs to come to the Board of Finance. Any lease or sale of real property or tangible personal property above $5,000 actually has to go through approval of various state agencies. That includes PED, HED, and then the Department of Finance and Administration. So we're proposing that $5,000 threshold increase to $30,000 in this bill. And then the Board of Finance threshold of $25,000, we're proposing to increase to $150,000. And then the state agencies that sell or lease property, over $100,000 or for a lease term of 25 years or more has to go to the legislature. So we're proposing an increase in that threshold from $100,000 to $550,000. These thresholds haven't been increased in decades. So what we're proposing is to just raise those thresholds to reflect current prices, current dollars, but still maintain that oversight of the state as appropriate. Excuse me.
All this is when you come in and you start a discussion and give her more time.
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. The cough drops just aren't helping that much. I apologize.
We could talk about Wyoming for a half an hour and
go
through all of Wyoming. And I know you're a big Wyoming fan and all of that good stuff.
Well, you know, and Mr. Chairman, in defense, I was cheering for the Lobos. Don't tell my Wyoming friends that, but that was a huge win. But with regard to this item, Mr. Chair, while Ashley's able to collect herself there with regard to the cold. Were the thresholds increased similar to what we did recently on the higher education thresholds for State Board of Finance approval, like using the CPI to adjust those historic thresholds? So we're really not changing anything other than to catch up with the costs, CPI adjusted.
Mr. Chair, Member Cassidy, that is correct. Yeah, and we did increase these by CPI and a little bit more. So we added a little bit of a buffer since these statutory, to have these increased again, we'd have to go back to the legislature. So we did add a little bit of buffer to account for increases over the next several years as well. And this really is going to impact, we did some analysis. I have a fiscal impact report that I'm happy to share with everyone. Really where this is going to benefit and be helpful is to just reduce an unnecessary burden on these local entities. And it's also really impacts the state agencies who have to review those dispositions of 5,000 to 25,000. And so because by raising that $5,000 up to 30,000, that will be very helpful. And I would say that most of the dispositions that they see are real personal, tangible personal property dispositions. Those types of things don't come to the Board of Finance, but they go to the state agencies, and that will help.
Is that it, Ashley?
Yes, Mr. Chair, for that item, I'm going to be quick about these others, just since I'm struggling to talk too much.
Do it real quick so that you keep your voice by the end of the day, or by the end of this meeting.
So Board of Finance has completed 13 fiscal impact reports so far on various bills. The other bills that we're kind of keeping an eye on that we have submitted FIRs for, there's several bills related to the land grant Merced and Asakia infrastructure. This would establish a 1.1% earmark coming from severance tax notes to fund land grant Mercedes and Asakias. So we've provided a fiscal impact report on that. That would come out of severance tax note proceeds, should that earmark be approved, similar to the Tribal Colonius Housing Trust Fund and water projects that the board already funds through severance tax notes. Also, we are watching and have responded to House Joint Resolution 11 and Senate Bill 290, which make amendments to the the Joint Resolution 11 repeals and replaces the anti-donation clause of the Constitution to allow nonprofits to receive direct appropriations if they provide a public purpose. And Senate Bill 290 is the enabling legislation for that, called the Vibrant Communities Act. So we have provided responses to that as, changing or allowing what are considered private entities by the IRS to receive direct appropriations. We need to be conscious of that for when we issue bonds for such projects. And we had bond counsel and tax counsel weigh in on both of those. We also are watching House Bill 47 and Senate Bill 192, which implement proposed changes to the veterans' property tax exemptions that were passed by the voters in November. Those are both bills serving as enabling legislation for that. So we provided a fiscal impact report response to that and are watching those. House Bill 145 authorizes the Department of Transportation to issue transportation bonds. So we're watching that as well, simply because it would be another bonding program that would be able to fund transportation projects throughout the state. And Deputy Director Trujillo has provided a lot of input on that and reported to the governor's office and provided some guidance from his time at DOT managing their bonding programs. And a couple others, Senate Bill 266, I'm not going to spend much time on this because it was tabled yesterday, but this was the bill that would have the Board of Finance reviewing and approving contracts for higher education institution administrators. So that was something we were watching, but it did get tabled. And then House Bill 351, I don't think this is moved at all, but It provides Board of Finance $200 million to provide emergency loans to Chavez County communities for flooding. We have actually responded to this, that we believe that this emergency funding should go to DFA, Local Government Division, simply because they've already implemented similar, like almost identical emergency response loan programs, like for the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. And so they already have that infrastructure in place to be able to provide those zero interest loans to those communities. So we're proposing that go to DFA. And then beyond that, we're watching several bills that would provide temporary COLAs or cost of living increases to para retirees of 2% for certain retiree members. So we're watching that, but haven't weighed in too much at this point in time. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for making it through, sticking it out. Questions or comments by committee members?
Mr. Chairman, I have
Member Montoya.
as far as all of the items with the bond capacity, how does that shift or change what we're currently doing? And is it all still anticipated for payments on July 1st and December 31st? And the reason why I ask that is because we're so overloaded during those 2 times of the year in trying to make sure we have everything done by 11 a.m. And so I had suggested that potentially we do a little bit later of a date if there's going to be a lot more different usages on the bonds. But what's your take?
Mr. Chair, Madam Treasurer, so we have made a note of that, and we've talked through it a little bit, and we're certainly happy to talk more. So this isn't really impacting bonding capacity, any of this. The Acequias and Land Grant Mercedes would be an earmark, which would be just a new use of our severance tax note capacity that we already have. So it wouldn't change any of that. Regarding the timeline for the debt service payments on severance tax bonds, we could move that. The only concern is all of our existing debt programs have to remain on those dates. And so then we'd have 2 separate dates to be making debt service payments and having to ensure that we're tracking which payments need to happen on which dates. So it's certainly something we can consider, but I would raise that as a consideration as to having 2 separate debt service payments and ensuring that we're managing all of the different QSIPs and ensuring that we're paying the correct QSIPs on the correct dates. So I think that would be something that I would just raise as something we should consider before making that decision.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Treasurer Montoya. One suggestion, Ashley, that I would make in terms of what we just discussed, if you would just send us an email concerning those pieces of legislation that you're watching. It doesn't have to be extensive, but just a brief, just like you did today. I think that might help us a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have that already prepared, so I can get that out this afternoon.
Thanks. With that, are there any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Ashley and Marcos, thank you if you're both feeling sick and sticking through this whole thing and not having us go to Santa Fe to get sick as well. That helps a bunch too. We appreciate that. I mean, you're real troopers to get through it the way you did, especially Ashley, because she was the main one doing most of the talking. So no slight on you, Marcos. I know you were there ready to go if she couldn't make it, but thank you both. I mean, we really, really appreciate it. And to everybody, thank you all very much for your time and patience. And I appreciate each and every one of you. With that, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion to amend by Member Lujan, a second by Treasurer Montoya. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, Treasurer Montoya.
Yes.
Member Sanchez.
Yes.
Member Cassidy.
Yes.
Member Trevisani.
Yes.
Member Lujan.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you all very much, and you have a great weekend. Judith, thank you for everything you do for us. We
You
appreciate
are welcome.
Feel
Thank
better,
you.
everyone at DFA.
Hope you feel
All right.
better, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Get well
guys.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.